the women, and I think he might have left before I said that, perhaps. So.
No, that's fine. Well, look, again, I want to just, really give a special shout out to Susan Packard for joining us today. We're so lucky. I mean, we've had sort of this whole thing in the works for about maybe 4 months now. When we first connected, and she was kind enough to do 2 with us. And of course, she's got 2 amazing books, Fully Human, which is her newest book. Yep. And there you go. New Rules of the Game. And of course, for all of our MS business, women here and our full-time MBA women here, of course, we bought those books for all of you. And as well, if there's any professional MBA and executive MBA women on, I believe both Mike Alexander and Julie Orzabal also bought those for you too. So excellent. We're so lucky, Susan, to have you on. Now, I know a number of you probably could not make it to the first one. So I did want to go ahead and give Susan, again, give you all a good introduction to her again. So let me just read a little bit about Susan to you. And she's, of course, going to be spending a good amount of time with you today. So Susan Packard is the co-founder of Scripps Networks Interactive, SNI, and former chief operating officer of HGTV. And of course, SNI, of course, has a portfolio of brands: HGTV, Food Network, Do It Yourself Network, Cooking Channel, the Country Music Network channel, and the Travel Channel are just the number of the ones that was, in a sense, under Susan's, control and so forth. She was the second employee of Scripps Network Interactive and helped to build the company to a market value of over $15 billion. She began her cable career at HBO, then moved to NBC and was part of the startup team for CNBC. In 1994, she joined HGTV and became chief operating officer in 1995. Under Packard's helm, HGTV became one of the fastest growing cable networks in television history. Today, HGTV is available in more than 99 million US homes and distributed in 175 countries and territories. So we're very fortunate. I told you she's also author of Fully Human, and you saw New Rules of the Game, 10 Strategies for Women in the Workplace. Without further ado, I'm handing it over to you, Susan. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's Friday afternoon. Yay. At some point, I'm hoping that I can actually come to College Station. I'm going to have to talk to Richard about that. But I've lived in Dallas and I've worked in Houston. I had several clients there. So I've kind of been on this, the circumference of where you guys are. And I'd love to come. And you are in a wonderful university. You should be very proud, and I'm sure you are. So yeah, so we're going to, I'm going to dive into it because Richard, it might be a little longer than I thought it was. And I do want to have plenty of time for questions. And we didn't talk about this, Sarah, but you can do your questions in the chat box, or you can just at the end, raise your hand. It looks like we, I think it's manageable if we do it that way. Are you okay with that, Sarah, wherever you are?
Yeah,
okay.
That sounds great.
Okay. So do you have, well, first of all, let me ask you a question. How many of you were in the session on Fully Human? There are a few hands, okay. And have you gotten New Rules of the Game yet? How many of you have read at least a little bit of New Rules of the Game? A few of you, okay. Well, this will help you then as I go through this, especially if you haven't read it. It'll give you a context for it. So we're talking about this book. This is a leadership book. I wrote this right after I left SNI, Scripps Networks. And I was an unlikely leader. So I didn't go to a fancy school like Texas A&M, went to state school. I didn't come from a pedigreed family with a fancy last name. My parents were first generation immigrants, Italian and Greek, both worked, middle class family. And as far as that name goes, I had, let's just say I didn't have the friendliest of last names. My last name, maiden name, is Bologna, Bologna. So needless to say, I was terrorized as a kid. You know, Susan Bologna, glad to have known you. I mean, they just went on and on. I was going to marry Oscar Mayer. I mean, just crazy stuff. So I didn't, you know, when you think about the typical person who rises into leadership, that wasn't me. And anybody, if you work hard and have some smarts and have a heart, can rise into leadership. So what I did have, I had something that I call gamesmanship, which is what this book is about. And this is how we express our competitive spirit. So I found gamesmanship as a girl, and I found it and kept it as an adult woman in business. And basically what it is you look at the game, you look at the playing field, the workplace, as one big playing field with many men and women running around on it. And the most important thing is that you're on the field, that you're not sidelined. And really, when you think about games and playing games, there's the winning and the losing, right? But gamesmanship is about more than a scorecard. It's also being a great player in all the human aspects of the workplace too. So we'll go through each of these. And so as I said, as a girl growing up, I had what you might describe as an unbridled competitive spirit. So it showed up in the classroom, it showed up on the ball field, it showed up at home, beating up my little brother, which is a whole nother, we don't have enough time to explain all that. But I started to get feedback from authority figures that I might want to tamp down my competitive spirit because it wasn't ladylike. So Sarah, can you play that first video, please?
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm gonna just give you some actions to do. And just do the first thing that comes to mind. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
My hair. Oh my God.
Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl.
Aw. My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run fast as you can.
So how do we stay Dakota? You know, the 10-year-old. Because what happens even today is that even for women in power, they have to wrestle with, how do I express myself competitively? I'm thinking of the December debates. On stage were Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, and then several men, and it was December. So the moderator had a little twist, and she said, in the spirit of the holiday, if you could choose to either give a gift or ask for forgiveness, which would you do? And every one of the men were giving gifts all over the place. And Both those women said I'd ask for forgiveness. Amy Klobuchar, because she said I can be really blunt, and Elizabeth Warren, because she said I can have a bad temper. And these are women who are, you know, in high positions of power. Michelle Obama, when she was in office, she gave a commencement speech when she was first lady. She gave a commencement speech and she said, at times I don't know if I am too loud and emasculating, and other times I don't know if I'm too soft. And you know, it's really interesting. When I moved my family to Knoxville, Tennessee to help start up HGTV, and I was really excited, you know, about the prospect of all the things we could do. And I met a neighbor who worked, a woman who worked, and we were having coffee one day, and I was telling her all these things that I wanted to do. And she was real quiet. And then she said, wow, you're really ambitious. And I had that one moment of, is that a compliment or, you know, and I thought to myself, well, what is ambition? It just means that you're a high achiever. So I said, you're right, I am really ambitious. But words can trip us up as women, and how we, I'm going to go through all of this, but how we carry ourselves. But at some point, you're the future. So at some point, if you get into position, if you want to be in positions of leadership and you get there, then you will be able to show your full humanity, and you will be able to model for the next generation of women that comes along. And that's what's important. So I'm really grateful that you're here for us to talk about this today. So basically what I'm saying is, because I don't want, you know, I'm not suggesting we act like men. Let me pull up the screen here. Can you see that? Okay, good. What I'm saying is act like an athlete. And by that I mean you come to work composed, with mental agility, right? And you think like and act like a winner. That's really all it means. And yes, there's nuance to it, and we'll get into that. What I offer in the book are 10 different strategies for women gamers, okay? And the first 7 are skills and behaviors, and the last 3 are about emotional maturity. And my second book is all about emotional maturity. I call it emotional fitness. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but it is the human side of how we are successful and how we show great leadership. So we'll go into each of these, and I'll dive right into conditioning. So conditioning is how we prep for game day, right? And game day is a C-suite job or a senior leadership job or a VP job. Not all of us are going to want to do that. That is totally cool. In fact, I think it's really laudable that you would know yourself well enough to say, I don't want to do that. You know, I want a job, I want fulfillment, but I don't want to run a company, or I don't want to run a team, or whatever. But if you do, here are 3 skill sets that I suggest you embrace. So line experience, financial knowledge, and having a global view. So let me get you back here. Okay, so line experience. How many of you are getting your MBA? Okay, not all of you. Some of you are getting an MA or an MS? Yeah, okay, all right.
MS Analytics or MS Business.
Okay. So anything math related is really, we'll get to that in a second, but line work is essentially driving profit. It usually means you have a some sort of a sales related job, but there are lots of different jobs that are line jobs. And in my book, at the end, I've got a whole list of line jobs. Now, It's one thing to manage expenses, but it's another thing to drive profit. And let me tell you how I found out about line work and line jobs. I was working at HBO. I was 25 years old, and I was a coordinator who would go and call on cable operators in wonderful places like Peoria, Illinois, in the dead of winter. And I tried to convince them to carry HBO. And that was, I liked what I was doing, but there was a girl in my office whose name was Cheryl, and she was a PR manager. And so what she did is she took my clients and other people's clients to the Hollywood premieres of HBO, movies and features and specials. And so she left, and I said, I want that job, right? So I went to talk to the big boss, and his name was Bill. He was a Texan. And he said, I said to him, I said, Bill, I'd like to take, her job. I know I could do a great job of it. And he looked at me and he said, Susan, do you want to run a company someday? Now, imagine how enlightened that was for this guy talking to a 25-year-old, young adult woman to ask that question. And I said, yeah. And he said, then don't you dare take that PR job. Stay in sales. Sales is line work. Now, I do a lot of university work, and in many universities in business programs, they don't talk about line work. I'm not sure why that is, but I thought it was important for you to know about that. And again, in the back of the book, there's different examples of line jobs. Okay, finance. If you haven't taken any, and I managed to skirt it, I got an MA, okay? I managed to go around the business courses and the finance courses, even when I got out of school. But when I got into middle management and somebody handed me an income statement, I went, uh-oh, I need to know this stuff. So having some financial background, if you wanted to get into leadership, is important. And the last is international experience. So I started the international department and developed the international department at HGTV. And I will tell you, it was such a broadening experience. I saw how our economies are so interdependent, and it helped me to think more broadly about inclusion. Because when somebody says to me, I don't know about you, but when somebody says to me, they throw the words diversity or inclusion at me, the first thing I think of is how many women, and the next thing I think of is how many women of color. And those two are absolutely critical, but we need to think even more broadly about inclusion. And when I work with white guys who run companies, I try to remind them that you don't have to hire somebody who looks like you, comes from your same neighborhood, comes from your same country club. In fact, the opposite is true. To have good debate around the table, you need to have a variety of voices. So that's what I mean when I say inclusion. All right, I'm going to go back to the screen. And so that's conditioning, that's skill one. Skill two, composure. This is one of those that we're measured in a different way than men are. There will be a time when this isn't the case, when you guys get into those positions and you hire more women. But today, this still exists. And composure is two things. It's how we carry ourselves and how we communicate. So how we carry ourselves are things like, do you run into work, or do you run into a class? Are you late? People who are late have very little composure. And that fake it till you make it, even if you're under stress, You don't have to let other people know. They don't know you're under stress. And it's those kinds of things. And there's also something I talk about in my book called tough face. Now, the best way for me to describe tough face is to give you two examples. One is Hillary Clinton, and the other is Donald Trump. They both have tough face. But for a man, oh, that shows strength. That shows, that person is really in charge. For a woman, it is harder. And I've noticed that, pretty early in my career, that women that carry themselves with a really serious, somber way, can be off-putting. So just something for you to think about. I'm hoping that in a few years, all this goes away. The last thing I want to mention about carriage is from my book. Some of you may have heard of Coach K. So he's the Blue Devils basketball coach. He's been there for like 40 years. And he has something that I put in my book, which is called Next Play. When is basketball, and remember, he's got guys that are 18 years old that are coming in. And so he's trying to mold them, in a way that so that they can have composure. So he says, when his basketball team goes up and down the court and completes a play, he yells next play, meaning don't dwell on what just happened, good or bad. Nothing is so important that it requires a lot of energy to celebrate or tear apart. It's a way to keep his team's head in the game. Keep moving, keep going, next play. And I bring this up because I ran into a woman last month. I had given these comments from this book 5 years ago to her. She has a large organization. And I mentioned that, and she said, do you know, and this was last month, she said, do you know that my employees are still talking about next play? So I think there might be some power to that for you to think about and possibly internalize. The other part of composure is words, how we communicate. So McKinsey did a study, and women say on average 20,000 words a day, and men say on average 7,000 words a day. So we wonder sometimes why we have communication gaps when we're working with men. Be clear, be succinct, be brief, be pithy. What I did when I realized this, because I would be talking to a group of men and it would be like, woo, lost them. I don't know where I lost them, but they're gone. I would rehearse in my mind, if I wanted to go into a meeting and debate a point, win a point, I would crystallize in my mind the 2 or 3 things that I wanted to say that would make it powerful. And we can do this. We can do role plays in our heads all the time. In fact, I encourage it. So, okay, so those are number 2. Now we get to 3, playing offense. So this is the verb that goes with line jobs. Playing offense is how you score points for your team. And you can do that by new sales, new partnerships, new ideas. I was writing this chapter and I was thinking about, this really means showing how you make money to your company. And I must have just seen Jerry Maguire. And I don't know how many of you have seen Jerry Maguire, but there's a scene in there with Cuba Gooding Jr. about show me the money. And that just kept in my head. And for a little fun, I'm going to ask Sarah to play that.
Jerry? Yeah, what can I do for you?
Show me the money.
Where'd it go? I guess we, oh well. So anyway, that was just for a little fun. Line work. Let me get rid of this. And okay. All right. Line work is incredibly important, and playing offense is incredibly important. But one of the things as women is, I've coached and mentored a lot of women, and asking for things is something that does not come comfortably for a lot of women. And we have to ask if we're going to get. So how we ask is important. And there is something in the book that I call artful assertiveness. And this is direct honesty with a smile, basically. And I learned about this because of an employee. So I was responsible. We moved into a beautiful facility. We had outgrown all of our facilities at HGTV, and we moved into a new space. And I was responsible for choosing where they were where people were going to sit. Were they going to sit in cubes, or were they going to sit in offices? And let me tell you, if you are ever in a position where somebody says to you, would you do this for me? The answer is no. It is a no-win kind of situation. So after that was over, I got a knock on my door, and Robin, who worked for me, said, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. So she came in and she said, I'd like to talk to you about why I got a cube instead of an office. I said, great, go for it. So she explained, she said, I've got a few people, and I'm not sure how I can, we can't have meetings in my cube. And I'm also concerned that this will be disruptive to the folks around me, because I know that there's going to be a lot of in and out. And she went on to say, and I have responsibility for partnerships, and I need confidentiality. And anyway, my point is, she gave me 3 or 4 reasons that were all for the good of the company. She didn't once say, why did Johnny get an office and I didn't? Every argument she had was for the good of the company. So when you are asking, think about, how do I frame it in a way that the company benefits? Because if you can't ask and do it that way, then you may need to rethink your ask. Okay? So I'm gonna tell you a story, and you're gonna tell me if you think this woman was artfully assertive. So a man and a woman, husband and wife, are taking a ride in the country, and the gentleman is this high-powered CEO. So they realize they need gas. They stop at a gas station. He starts pumping gas. She walks in to get something, and she's in there for quite a while. And he's waiting for her, and she finally comes out, and she's got this big smile on her face, and she says, I ran into somebody I dated. It was so great to see him. He works here. And the husband is quiet for a second, and he looks at her and he says, I bet I know what you're thinking. I bet you're thinking you're glad you married me, a high-powered CEO, and not him, a gas station attendant. And she said, no, I'm thinking if I'd married him, he'd be a high-powered CEO and you'd be a gas station attendant. Yeah, do you think, was that artfully assertive? Good. All right. Guess we got to go back to the slides. All right. There was that building that I had to make those darn choices. Okay. Brinksmanship. Brinksmanship is the game of negotiations. And if you haven't yet had to negotiate, and if you are going into business, I promise you, you will have to negotiate. And women negotiate differently than men. So women try for win-wins. And truthfully, in my experience, because I always was across the table from men, they go for win-lose. That's just the reality. So I wanted to show you a video clip, but I couldn't pull it up, from this film. So this film is Arbitrage. It was a 2012 film. Our back, Richard Gere has his back to us, unfortunately. I'd much rather be looking at Richard Gere than that gentleman. But, and the context of this is Richard Gere's called, you know, a meal with this gentleman who wants to buy his company. But Richard Gere feels like he's moving too slowly. And so you would think that he would be cajoling and whining and dining him. No. Basically, he reads him the riot act. He rails at him. He tells him he's going to put out a press release that says this is a failed acquisition and your stock price is going to go down by 40% and on and on. And they end up doing the deal and they end up being friends. Now, you might think that that's ridiculous, except that was my experience of negotiating across the table. So just for you to know, here are, and I'm hoping it's not your experience, but it may be. Here are 4 tips, if you will, that are in the book. And I'm not going to go over each of them, but I will mention the walkaway. Because the walkaway for women is really important. We have a hard time with this, and it can also cascade into our personal lives. So, and by that I mean, let's say you get a job, your first job, right? Or maybe it's your second job, but you're walking in the door and you haven't quite closed the deal. So you're going to sit with them and talk about compensation. If you don't walk in there with a value that you assign yourself, you will let them assign your value. And you don't want to do that. Now you can find comparable jobs. You can find lots of ways to do this. But I will tell you that in having hired hundreds of people, over half of the men tried to negotiate their compensation. Some did, some didn't. Only about 10 to 15% of women did. And that starting point for you in a job is where you get pegged there, if you will, meaning it's harder for you to navigate compensation after your starting point. You can get promotions and things like that, but that's really important. And look, I realize that today, especially today with COVID, we want a job, right? I get that. I was the primary breadwinner. My husband was a stay-at-home dad. I needed a paycheck. I get that too. But I'm just telling you that the walk away, the ability to say, and this is in negotiations too. Okay, I know that I can't go any lower than $100. I'm making this up for this product I'm selling you. I know that. So you know what your walkaway point is. And then the rest of these are sort of adjunct to it. And we can talk about these, you know, when we have Q&A, if you'd like to. It's a question I get a lot of is you know, how do you negotiate and what's the best approach? So, okay, moving on. Fan clubs. So if you want to be team captain, you need a fan club. Team captain meaning being in a position of leadership. And fan clubs are especially important for women because Stanford research has validated again and again that there is an inverse relationship, a negative correlation between success and likability for women. Negative. The higher you go up, the less liked you are. Whereas it's a direct correlation for men. The higher you go up, the more liked you are. So that's just a product of our culture. I mean, we could spend hours talking about why that is, but the reality of how you fix it is through having a fan club, building your network, okay? Now, it's harder today with COVID, right? I mean, a year ago, if I were giving these remarks, I would tell the group, take somebody to coffee, take somebody to lunch, get to know somebody outside the four walls of your department so that you have a broader view of your company and you make friends, you build relationships that way. But you can still do it. You know, you may do it on the phone, but you can still do it. I mean, another thing I did, I moved 4 times with HBO in my 20s. Now you may want never to move, but if you are open to that, every time I moved, I built up a client base, you know, people I knew, and I stayed in touch with them. So those kinds of things are ways for you to build your network. Ask for help, you know, get to know people outside your department. Humor, by that I mean, carry yourself lightly. This gets a little bit back to tough face. Carry yourself lightly. You know, nothing is that serious. And then sign up for cross-functional teams and task forces. And by the way, part of the reason I have humor on there, I never appreciated it per se, and I'm not a naturally funny person. So maybe that's one of the reasons I didn't appreciate it. But when I started at HGTV, I was with 7 other guys, and they were constantly, you know, it was a lot of trash talk, but they were constantly just, I mean, they thought everything they said was so darn funny. After a while, I realized that I needed to kind of sort of go with it. And it actually is freeing when you do. Okay. Rule 6, practice, practice, practice. So this is where I beg of you, if you plan to go into corporate America, don't drop out too soon. We have a tendency human nature, to be impatient and to say, gosh, you know, when am I going to get that promotion? When am I going to, you know, do all these things? But the fact is, and I'll refer to this, you may have read it, you may have not. He said in this book, Malcolm Gladwell, it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything. It takes a long time. And so, you know, the knee jerk when you're feeling frustrated and impatient is, I'm going to go start my own company, or, you know, I'm going to go join that company. And corporate America desperately needs women in leadership positions. You are going to change the lives of hundreds of thousands, millions of people if you get into that position and you're willing to hang tough. And one of the ways you can stay in your organization is to take a lateral move, especially if you're having issues with your boss. Used to be, somebody would say, oh, I was offered a lateral position. Like, you know, it's a demotion. If anything, it's a promotion, because there's somebody in another department that thinks strongly enough of you that they want to bring you into their their division, department, whatever it is. And it is no longer a ladder to the top. It is now a jungle gym. So when I would seek talent to promote, I would look to see if they had experience in more than one department. That was very impressive to me. So lateral moves. Okay. So we're now to rule 7, suit up. This is how we dress as women, okay? Now, I was writing this And I mean, I really wrote it tongue in cheek. I had a lot of fun writing this chapter, and I was absolutely sure that the editor was going to just edit it right out. Well, not only did they not edit it out, they wanted more on this topic. And when I did my book tour, the first question CNN asked was about chapter 7, how we dress. So obviously it's something that's still in the public vernacular, you know, it's still important. So I will tell you the 2 rules, and I'm going to come back to you all. The 2 rules are: 1, do not dress provocatively. So if there's no such thing as provocative dress for men, let's start there. If you walk into a meeting and a man has 3 buttons of his shirt unbuttoned, he's probably one of my Italian relatives. Nobody cares. But if you do that, it could spell disaster. So don't dress provocatively. And the second is, I'll tell by way of a story. So we wanted to thank our advertisers who had been with us from the very beginning. And we decided to have this swanky event at the Rainbow Room in New York City. It's a very, you know, fancy dancy place in New York. I was in New York at meetings all day, running late, and these were my clients and, you know, my teams. I had to kick off the event. So I run into my room, change clothes, go over to the Rainbow Room. Somebody pushes me up on stage, and I start the welcome. And these 2 spotlights are on me. And I'm talking, and I don't know what made me look down, but I looked down, and my skirt was on completely backwards. In fact, I knew it because the zipper teeth were gleaming in the lights, okay? So I exited. I had a very quick welcome. And so the second rule is invest in a full-length mirror and use it. There are a lot of things that can go wrong on the lower half for us. So invest in a full-length mirror and use it. Okay, now I'm going to go back to share screen. Now and there it is, the infamous Rainbow Room. Now we come to the 3 tent poles for this book on emotional maturity or emotional fitness, okay? And I write them in sports language, but these 3 are really respect, resilience, and inclusion. So respect. When I don't know how many of you are working right now. Are any of you working? A few of you are, okay. And the rest are still in school. Well, when you choose your workplace, if you want to be emotionally fit, which is being in a place of steadiness, peace of mind, and joy about your work, then you should respect the organization, respect the leadership, respect the culture, respect the organization, your colleagues, you know, the founders. Do you know the story of how the company even got started? These things are important for you, for your own peace of mind. I will tell you that the job I had before HGTV, I didn't have that respect. And I learned what could happen to my own peace of mind without that. You know, Sir Isaac Newton, the famed scientist, said, "If I have been able to see further, it is only because I have stood on the shoulders of giants." Respect. The other part of respect, ladies, is respecting yourself. Self-respect. a very important part of your peace of mind. I've worked with many women who have trouble with their self-worth for any number of reasons. You have to have a solid sense of self for you to be able to give it to your organization, to its culture, to your friends, to your family. So self-respect is a very important part of that. The second is resilience. So resilience is grit. And I happen to think women, I hope Richard's not listening, I happen to think women are especially qualified here and have a gift of resilience because we're asked to do so many different things all the time. And grit includes tough situations. I share a story in the book about early in my career, I was traveling for business and I was assaulted in my hotel room. And I share that story because I want any of you, if you get into jobs where you're traveling, to be, I was naive, for you to not be naive. And so I have a lot of information in that chapter about that will help you with that. But grit, so pushing through fear, it's the willingness to push through fear, not get stuck, get to the other side, and try to think about what did I learn, right? The bravest people I know are not fearless. The bravest people I know are intimate with fear, but they found a way to push through it. So that's what resilience is. And the last is inclusion. And we talked a little bit about that. I'm going to go back here. We talked a little bit about that when I talked about starting the international department. So here's me and the guys. This is the startup team of HGTV. And yes, I know we're all white. And yes, I know there's only one woman. This was taken a few years ago. We were celebrating 20 years of being on the air. It doesn't look like that today. I'm really proud of the senior team today as people of color, many women. But, and we didn't look like that when we started out. No one was bald, no one had gray hair, but startups will do that. Anyway, this team and I, we just gelled, okay? So the gentleman to the left is Ken Lowe. HGTV was his idea. He hired me, and then we fanned out and hired people. So he's employee one, I'm employee two. And it was important for us to make our organization inclusive. And we tried to see it in a larger way. But one of the things that was interesting about, there are 8 of us here. 5 different religions are represented in these 8 people. We had Northern Catholics, we had Southern Baptists, we had a Mormon, we had a Jew, we had an agnostic. I guess that's everything. But I mean, that you would think, oh, that's not that big a deal. But it is, because when you are thinking about how you schedule your program, how you create your programming, when you are thinking about what you write on holiday cards, when you are thinking about how you decorate your building for the holiday, all of these things come into play. And it was very helpful to me to have those diverse voices around the table. And we also tried to be inclusive of all levels in the organization. And we didn't do it perfectly. But one thing we did do that I'm proud of is when we got within spitting distance of making a profit, which for a startup is pretty amazing because 9 out of 10 fail. We actually saw that we were going to make money. We got around a table and we decided that we would give away our first $1 million to our employees. But we kind of rigged it. So first of all, we excluded ourselves. But most importantly, what we did is we said the only criteria for the size of your check that we give you of that $1 million is how long you've been with us. And, you know, our assistants and our coordinators were with us much longer than our vice president. So it was a happy day on all fronts when we could give those checks. So, and do you, you know, at entry-level positions, are you offering training programs? All of that, you have to look at your whole organization, not just who's in your mind's view, you know, for most of the working day. Okay. So I'm closing with some words from Melinda Gates, who I'm a big fan of. She's written, I don't know how many books, but and I'm a fan of Bill Gates too, for the work they do around the world. She says, when you invest in women, you invest in people who invest in everybody else. And if you gradually start to take action, it won't be long before you realize that investing in women is good for your mind, good for your soul, and good for your business. I just love that quote. Okay, so great leaders, 7 skills and 3 skills in terms of emotional fitness. And then if you do ever get to a place where you want to read more about emotional maturity, emotional fitness, I have a whole book dedicated. Okay, that's that. So we're going to stop share. And now I wanted, Sarah, should I mention, where are you? There you are. Do you want to mention it or do you want me to mention it?
You can go ahead and mention it and then I'll drop it in the chat.
Okay, so ladies, for you to know, I have I have a blog, which is free. I have a quarterly newsletter, which is free. If you have any interest in those, Sarah is going to put the link in the chat box, and please just send your name. Give us your name and your email. That's all I need. And I'll make sure that you get that. In fact, yesterday I published the fall newsletter so that we could get that to you too, if you'd like that. So questions? Let me go to chat and see if I can just bring them up. Okay, so I don't see any questions. Do you have any that you want to ask of me?
Oh, we got a couple folks with their hands raised.
Okay.
Go
Why
check
don't
here.
you do, you can probably see better than I can, Sarah.
Yeah, Kathleen, if you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, Susan. I am a full-time MBA. And first off, I just want to say that you have become one of my role models because I would love to be a CEO of a company someday. And just like, I think your whole story is so inspiring. And I came into this MBA to get leadership experience and to be a future leader. But my question has to deal with, you were talking earlier about ambition and ambitious women. And something that I've seen a lot recently, whether I was in the workplace or just with my friends who are in corporate, ambitious women get blocked, whether it's because of a man or it's because of another woman that's threatened by them. And when we are put in those kinds of situations, what is your best advice for how we should handle that when we are trying to move up the ladder and someone's trying to block that?
Right. It's one of the reasons, and thank you for that question. It's one of the reasons that I talked about lateral moves. First of all, if you are in an organization that's blocking women who are skilled and high achievers, then you have to ask yourself if you want to be in that organization. So fundamentally, it's really hard to, you cannot change a culture that's already been set as one person. You can change it as many people, but as one person, it's really hard to change a culture. So it's a very big thing. So if that is going on, the company itself may be an issue. If the company itself is not an issue, but your boss is, look around. Think about your skill sets. International, for example. If you speak a second language, you would get an immediate interview. You would have gotten an immediate interview in my organization to help me with international, even if your background is tech or something that had nothing to do with it. So this is also about making sure you take an inventory of your skills and know all of them. If you can't find a lateral position, if you can't change your boss, then you have to ask yourself, do I go to HR and talk about this? And then you have to ask, I'm sorry, I'm going to be really candid about this, but is HR bought and sold in the C-suite? In other words, will they even respect the confidence of what you're asking them, and will they help you? So you have several steps, and if ultimately none of those things can work out for you and you can get another job, then I would say that you really ought to consider it. I got asked a lot when I published this book about women blocking me. I had no women blocking me, but I will say this: I had very few women, in cable television and programming. There just were very few women. But the women that I did run into, we became great friends because we had each other. I think in Fully Human, I talk about this, that there were several groups of women that came together in their organizations to support one another. And if it's a guy who's doing it, it ends up in the same place, which is you have 2 or 3 different choices to make. But there are best companies to work for lists. Just Google it. There's a bunch of great companies to work for. And you all, you're in an MBA program at a very prestigious university. You're going to do just fine. Does that help, Kathleen?
Yes, it does. And also just a closing comment. My family is huge Tennessee fans. So I'm very jealous of you being in Knoxville. We actually tried to win the Knoxville Dream Home a couple years ago. It didn't work out.
I'm sorry.
TTV, love everything about you. Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathleen. I hope we can stay in touch.
All right, I have another question, got a couple other hands raised here, so we'll just go down the line. So Haley Miller, if you would like to go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. My name is Haley Miller, and I am an undergrad in the Business Honors Program, and had no idea how much I was going to enjoy this presentation. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for putting this on for us.
You're welcome.
But I really wanted to ask, I haven't been able to stop thinking about when you said it, how women are, you've noticed, significantly more resilient than men. And once you said that, I looked back at the women I know in my family and my life, and I definitely see that. And I was wondering if you had any advice for women our age to kind of step into becoming those resilient women and following in those footsteps.
Well, I would say that I would look inside myself first and find the examples, because I think you might be surprised. You might not need to look any further than to just look at your own life. I'm a huge journaler. So, done 8 journals. It was one of the things that helped me to write my books, because I had this memory from all these journals. You all should be journaling about your strengths. For some reason, we tend to look at the other side of the ledger. But to answer your question, and then I would say, I'll tell you what I did. I had an Aunt Rachel. She never married. She was a career woman. She lived in New York City. I'm this kid from Detroit, and she was just this larger than life figure for me. And whenever she was in town, I would just sit with her and I would just ask her questions. And She said I drove her nuts. But I mean, she was very dear to me and she was a huge role model. So finding, it sounds like you have people. And, what is it they do and how is it that they have the grit and the determination? And meld that with your own. I really don't think you need to look too far.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Angel, you are up. Go ahead and unmute.
Awesome, thank you. So I hope you don't mind, I wrote the question down on my phone, so I'll be reading from it. But first of all, thank you so much for doing this talk. I'm enjoying it so much.
You're welcome.
So I guess I have two kind of related questions. The first being, I've heard in business situations, it's not great for a woman to say, I'd love to do this, or I'd love to meet with you, being that I'd love to is a phrase that's very feminine, and it's lose face by saying it. I was going to ask if you find this true or not. And then my second question would be kind of in the same line of thinking, where in your experience, do you believe that when a woman is too kind in business, they can lose face, I guess?
Mm-hmm. That second question is really a delicate balance. There's no formula here. I would say that when I negotiated, I had all kinds of tough face, right? But when I was engaging with my employees, I mean, they sort of called me Earth Mother, I took it, after I left, I found this out. And I took it as a compliment, but my door was always open. And so I think it's a delicate balance. What I thought you were going to talk about when you said, I'd love to, that was not my experience. I'd love to be a part of that team. No one ever looked at me askew when I said that. But where I thought you were going with it, and this is an important thing, is I mentored a woman once, coached a woman who every time, and she was in a group, her executive team looked like my executive team. So she was the only woman with 7 or 8 guys. Every time one of the guys said, can one of you organize the charity event? She'd say, I'd love to. And I said, you have to stop doing that. Somebody else can organize the charity event. These things are not line, right? This is staff stuff. And, but my experience, Angel, is not that saying I love to is anything derogatory or was not demeaning of me to me. I think it shows passion. It shows enthusiasm. That's been my experience. So thank you.
All right. I am going to apologize now because I am not quite sure which way you pronounce your name, but Judea or Judea, if you would like to unmute and go ahead and ask your question now.
Thank you so much. You got it. It's Judea.
Hello, Judea.
Thank you. Hi. I'm really interested. I am a member of the professional MBA program and initially was working, unfortunately was laid off due to the pandemic, and am now back in not just a job search, but back in the position of having to interview and negotiate and have those conversations. And so I'm really interested. I know you touched on negotiating and being able to state your worth, but what are some of I guess your 3 quick tips of how to go into negotiations? I'm a little sensitive sometimes about the assertiveness. Being a Black woman in business fields, I've been told before that my assertiveness comes off as anger. And I don't want to play into this there's kind of the stereotype of an angry Black woman that I'm very careful about when I go into these positions. So I would love, because of your position, your experience, the teams you've been on, what do you think are some of the good ways to go into a mindset to be able to state my value and be assertive, but not kind of move on into an area where, I play into a stereotype?
Yeah, and by the way, thank you for your honesty and candor. And for other women of color, there may be, some real value in our having this discussion. When I was at HGTV, I was offered a different position, COO position. And the first thing I did is I did research. And I've looked out in the workplace, comparable positions, how much do comparable positions pay? I had my data. So the first thing I would say is you do everything you can. Maybe you need to call a headhunting firm, but do everything you can to get your data. And then I position it in such a way that I talked about the range, right? So when you're asking questions about, if somebody offers you a job and they say, we're going to pay you $50,000 a year for this job, I would say politely, remember, artful assertiveness, direct honesty with a smile. I would say, could you please share what the range is for this job? So that you have a sense of where they're putting you, because every company has a range. I mean, in the real little ones, maybe not so much, but in larger companies, they look at that. And they, you know, every year when we look at how we're going to adjust people's compensation. So artful assertiveness, data, ask about the range. And if you can, have a walkaway point. And again, I said earlier that it's hard when, especially in this job market, it may be that in this moment in time, you can't have a walkaway point because you need the work and you need the income. Perfectly understandable. But know that as we, I mean, at some point, whether it's a year from now or whenever it is, we will be in a different place as far as COVID and whatnot. So companies are going to bounce back and they're going to need strong people because the supplies, you know, the revenues and the supply and all of that's going to start beefing up again. So does that help, those 2 or 3 things?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next question is from Nira.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I really enjoyed everything you had to say. I'm one of the MBA students. So my question, it's coming from some experiences that I've had. Something I have faced a lot are people who talk about diversity and inclusion, and they think that they're inclusive, but they don't check their microaggressions and they don't realize when they're unintentionally not inclusive. And I face this mostly from women actually in the workplace. So my question is, what are some ways as a woman of color that I can navigate that in corporate America?
So you're working as well as getting your MBA?
No, this was pre-MBA.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would say there's no better solution than sitting with the person who is, who you feel is, you know, think about how you want to position it, what you want to say, role play it in your mind. And if there are, you know, 1 or 2 good things about this person and their skill set, make sure you mention that too, right? But, you know, just tell them. And if it's, and ask them, you know, this is how it seems to me. Do you hear it? Can you understand where I'm coming from? And if there are 2 or 3 other women who have had the same experience you've had, it is helpful sometimes to come as a group. Now that can work 1 of 2 ways. If the person is insecure and you come with 3 people and say, I want to have a meeting, that could really freak them out and it could backfire. But I know for us, we were going through a period where we were getting feedback from in Knoxville, Tennessee is a largely Christian community. And we were getting feedback from some employees that they didn't feel we were representing Christianity in our programming enough. So a couple of us said, let's get a meeting. And, there were 3 of them and a couple of us, and we worked through it and we explained our perspective, they explained their perspective. But having more than just you on the spot might be helpful in the future. And again, if your HR department is independent enough of the C-suite, you can also talk to them about it. Does that help? You're welcome.
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
All right, we have 2 more raised hands questions, and then we have one in chat as well that we will get to. So the next person, I am not quite sure of your name, ma'am. So if you would like to go ahead and unmute and ask your question and let us know who you are.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't put my name on it. My name is Adriana.
Hello, Adriana.
And I graduated in 2013. So I think I'm one of the oldest one in the group, but I really want to thank you, Susan. I really enjoyed this discussion, and also for A&M for not forgetting the former students. So thank you so much. So Susan, I just wanted to tell you that I hope I had these rules 20 years ago. Because you hit each one spot on. Every rule that you talked about, I lived it, and I'm like, yes, it took me 5 years to realize I had to change my behavior, or I had to change my approach, or something like that. So, like for example, everybody tells me I have a lot of passion. Because I fight for my customers. I want them to have the best service. And I had to learn, because at first it's like, okay, so why things cannot get done? And why is this bureaucracy? Things like that. And people just didn't take it the right way. I was fighting for the company, and many people didn't see it that way. So that was like something that in my 20s really hurt me. And I had to learn the hard way. Another thing, when you said lateral moves, those ones are so important. The more skills that we learn throughout the years, the more it's going to help us out at the end. Because like, for example, right now I'm in supply chain, but I'm looking towards a lateral move to sustainability. So and I manage a foundation when I was living in Colombia. I'm from Colombia. And so, and when I was managing that foundation, that was 15 years ago. And now those skills back then are gonna help me now to move into the sustainability role that I really want. So, those lateral moves, everything that we learn along the way is going to help us out. And the cross-functional teams, that's the perfect environment that has helped me expand my network. Because sometimes when we're in a company, it's only you're familiar with your department. But when you start enrolling yourself with cross-functional teams, so you're going to be able to meet more people. You're going to be able to see more how the company works in the different areas, and that has really saved me, because a lot of more people can put a good word for you. So, Susan, you got that one. That really helped me. And the last thing that I wanted to say is, don't forget to fight for what you want or what you like to do, because the job
doesn't need to feel like a job. I mean, we wake up every morning and we do this, we go to a workplace, and that's going to be for the next 20 or 30 years. So I've had jobs that have been very boring. I didn't want to wake up to go to work. But there are other jobs like the one that I'm right now. I really enjoy it. I like the team. I like the company. And always try to find that job. Money is not everything in life. Find what you like, what is gonna wake you up in the morning to, and it's gonna motivate you to go to work. And I fell on that at one point in my career when I wanted to do a lateral move, and my boss said, "You're my top performer, you cannot leave." And I didn't leave. And a month later, my boss left. So I lost the opportunity to do something else that I really wanted to do. So that's what I wanted to share. That has been my experience. And thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad a lot of my new Aggies that are going to go into the workplace, they're going to have these rules right now.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay,
All right. Yeah, I got 2 more hands up and still have the question in chat. So Avery, let's go ahead and go to you real quick.
Hi, Susan. I'm Avery. I'm an undergraduate student. I am currently applying for the MS Business program.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with us. I really enjoyed everything that you had to say, and it was so helpful.
Great.
So my question relates to like composure. So I was wondering, how do you balance having your tough face while also remaining like a compassionate and caring like boss, I guess? Because, you know, it's so true that so often powerful women are seen as cold or uncaring or any of those things just because they're in a powerful position. Like you said, like, you know, the correlation between success and likability. So how do you maintain that balance between keeping your tough face and also remaining compassionate?
So, yeah, and I guess I'm only an advocate for tough face if you're with people with tough face, if you're negotiating with tough face people. Otherwise, I'm really not an advocate of it. I think it can be off-putting. I'm really more of an advocate of shoulders back, chin high, smile, and walk and be confident and, you know, take care of business. I'm more of an advocate of that. And I think maybe it's one of the reasons that I could get into senior leadership positions. I saved tough face for the negotiations with the jerks like from Arbitrage, from that movie. So I don't think I mean, it doesn't mean that, and sometimes we're listening and we're trying to understand a point. So, I mean, we're not going to be always smiling, but that's a different, everybody should be pretty much on the same page if you're in a situation like that. But generally speaking, I think it's more about how that you carry yourself with confidence, with calm, with composure, and at least a little ghost of a smile on your face all the time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Clarissa, I see you've got your hand up. So if you'd like to go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Susan. So my question was, I feel like oftentimes we look at bias against women from like a man exerting bias over women, but what would you, or how would you approach maybe like more internalized misogyny that you see in the workplace? And have you ever experienced that either personally or from a colleague?
I'm not sure I completely understand, but I will tell you that I'm not sure I completely understand your question, because internalized misogyny, I haven't confronted much of that. I mean, it's usually something gets said, and you know that's where they're coming from. But we did put into place at Scripps a lot of programs around this issue to help with unconscious bias. There is unconscious bias. And, unfortunately, it's mostly directed toward us, toward women. So, I guess I would say that if you're in an organization, hopefully they have those kinds of programs. If they don't, again, it's back to, it's a conversation that you have with HR. Can you trust HR? And it's a touchy subject, because people don't want to admit that that they've got these biases. But you work it through either in a team approach with HR, one-on-one with HR, one-on-one if you can, one-on-one with the person. But you don't have to be accusatory. There's ways you can couch things that are not making the person feel like they're immediately going to be on the defensive. So I don't know if that answers your question. If I maybe didn't really understand it. But thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that helped.
Okay, we have 5 minutes, right? Before
Yes,
we.
correct. I've got one question in chat and then we'll probably wrap it up after that. So the question is from Katie. She asks, how do you propose that women in the workplace handle the direct or indirect questions in interviews or in promotion conversations that point towards becoming a mother now or in the future? So the assumption that this is on the horizon has been shown to have negative impacts on advancement of women in the workplace. So how to handle those direct or indirect questions about motherhood.
Yeah, well, nobody should be asking you if you want to be a mother, if you're going to be a mother. I mean, I think that's illegal actually, but it all starts with look at the best companies to work for. On those lists include, best companies to work for women, best companies to work for women who are mothers. Best company, they're out there if you Google it. And if you happen to if you happen to be in one of the worst companies to work for, that's going to be an issue. You're going to want to do everything you can to onboard after you have children back into the organization. And good companies that are sensitive to this issue. By the way, it's really expensive to lose people permanently and then have to retrain people. So it's in a company's best interest to be supportive of women who've had children. And men are more and more too saying, hey, I want to have some time off with my newborn. So companies that think in a contemporary way, these really shouldn't be and aren't issues. But if they are, I would go through the same, I'd say, do I respect this organization? Do I want to stay in this organization? Do I have to stay in this organization? And if I do, it's never too soon to start thinking about, moving when you can to a place that is respectful of mothers, for God's sakes. I mean, it seems, but I know what you're asking, because there are plenty of organizations that, I will call you up even when you're off on maternity leave and say, hey, I got a question about blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, well, let me just finish my breastfeeding and then I'll be able to answer that. But so yeah, I hope that helped. I'd also want to mention one other thing, which is any of you who've read or will read either of my 2 books, New Rules of the Game or Fully Human, if any of you are willing to just go to Amazon and throw a review on there and you tell me you did it. So you send me an email saying, hey, I did this, and I'll be looking too. I'm going to have you draw, I'm going to have a drawing for a 1-hour coaching session with me. So You know, I am Susan at susanpackard.com, which is where my blog is. And it's also my email address. So you can reach me there anytime. Just identify yourself that, you know, we talked or you were part of this group today. And if you write a review, your name will go into a hat, and I'll pull a name and we'll get some time together. So, well, thank you, Sarah, wherever you went. I keep losing
Absolutely.
you. There you are. Thank you, Richard, and thanks all of you. Really thoughtful questions, and a smart group of young women who you are our future. So I am delighted to get to spend some time with you. So thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Susan. We really appreciate it, and certainly we'll be in touch soon. And I know I can see a lot of comments going into the chat now thanking you. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. We'll be in touch soon.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.